Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us on This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us. As mentioned on the program, back on the show is Dave Crenshaw. Dave is a time management consultant to some of the nation's top business executives and author of the book, I love this, The Myth of Multitasking, How Doing It All Gets Nothing Done. And I thought it was just me. Actually, there are other people that fall into that category. Dave, welcome back to This Week in America. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be back, Rick. I appreciate it.
You know, there are so many things to talk about, and I want to start because I've been getting some of the newsletters, and you can go to Dave's website, davecrenshaw.com, very simple, or you can log on to our website and then link up to that. And looking at some of the webinars that you've been doing, which are free, and looking at some of the newsletters you have there, it's interesting how you're saying we really need to take a different look at how we look at our productivity. Up until this point, we've been measuring it strictly by the hours we put in rather than by the actual productivity. And you tell a great story of somebody making $200,000 and they're asked, how many hours do you work a week? And the guy comes back to like 130, 140. And you're saying, if that's the case, you're not really making a whole lot per hour.
Right. And that's part of the issue is so many people are excited when they get on a salary that they stop thinking about what their value per hour is. And they don't realize that the fastest way to give themselves a raise is by getting everything done that they're asked to do or required to do, but in less amount of time. And most people pride themselves on being busy rather than on the results that they obtain. And many bosses require busyness, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you consult, and you do with a number of the major corporations, and you're saying don't necessarily judge somebody's output by the time they're actually sitting at the desk and working, judge it by the actual productivity you're getting. It may they may be there for 4 hours, but getting 8 hours of productivity. What is their reaction when you tell them you maybe want to look at this a little bit differently?
Well, it's funny. Honestly, the reaction that I get most of the time is, oh, well, that makes sense. I just didn't think of it that way. but it's part of the society that we're living in right now that is conditioning us to so much action, to constantly move, to constantly respond to the email, to the voicemail, to every little whim of the day. And we're not stopping and really thinking about what the consequence of doing things that way is.
Well, you break it down on a cost basis, and you have another great example with the three-hole punch and the busy business executive who figures out he's, I think, worth like $500 an hour or something with what the activities that he's doing, yet he's wasting a lot of time trying to find a paper punch, going through something that basically, anybody in the office would be able to do. When you point these things out to people, is there a light bulb you see that goes off? It's like, well, you're right. Why am I wasting my time doing something that's really somebody else could do and it's not that productive?
Well, yes. I mean, it's pretty clear. Someone says, oh, I'm doing $10 an hour work, but I can bill at $150 an hour. That it turns on the light bulb. Unfortunately, the trickier prospect is getting them to actually alter their behavior, because they're conditioned to respond in a certain way. And so what we really have to do is recondition them to respond in a different way, sort of like developing muscle memory if you're learning how to play golf or a musical instrument. It's the same approach. You have to recondition the way that you react to different stimuli in your day.
You know, it's interesting as we go about our day, all of the time that's lost, and you've quoted a survey, a study that basically shows every 11 minutes, which basically comes to 5 times an hour, we're interrupted. So we have to stop, go back, refocus, and try to pick up where we were after that interruption is dealt with.
Right, and that's just a separate issue from, are we spending our time doing less valuable activities? Then there's just the time that we're wasting in switching costs. Switching costs is just the mental transition, the mental effort, and the time cost that it takes to move from one activity to the next. It's funny, I spoke in Kansas just a couple of weeks ago, and I surveyed everyone there and said, how many times would you estimate you're interrupted in an hour? And in a day. And the average answer I got was about 100. One guy even put 1 million.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of funny. But we are just getting so bombarded by interruptions, not just from the world around us, but from our own thoughts and our own heads are interrupting us.
Well, that's interesting. When the guy says 1 million, obviously that's probably at least a slight exaggeration, but in his mind, he sees it as being virtually unlimited. It's like all the time I'm getting interrupted. When you have that mindset, I would think it would be even more difficult to complete the task at hand when you're just thoroughly emotionally exasperated by all the interruptions.
Right, right. And that's why it's important to implement techniques in your day that help minimize the number of interruptions. I prefer the word switches. It's the same thing, that minimize the number of switches that take place in your day. You can't completely get rid of them, but you can do a lot to greatly reduce the number of switches that occur in your day.
You're talking, we're listening to Dave Crenshaw. Dave is the author of the book, The Myth of Multitasking, How Doing It All Gets Nothing Done. You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Dave's is very simple, davecrenshaw.com. In fact, you don't call it multitasking, you call it switch tasking. And that basically, that brings it home. It's not like you're multi makes it sound like you're successfully juggling all of these. Switch tasking is actually the way most of us see it, where it's actually, okay, we're stopping this and we're switching to this, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Right. I saw a study just in the last week from Vanderbilt that once again reaffirmed the fact that when someone is multitasking, all they're doing is giving the illusion that they're doing multiple things at the same time. But even on a brain science, chemistry level, it's only able to handle one active task at a time. So what you're doing is you're switching rapidly back and forth between these tasks. And I even exchanged an email with one of the researchers, Paul Dux, and he what's the word I'm looking for? He said yes, and there is that cost. Even when you start getting faster and faster at multitasking, it still doesn't eliminate the problem that you're getting slower as if you were just doing things one at a time.
So it's not just Dave saying this is the case. This is neurologically, it's like our brain can't comprehend, can't make the switch that quickly.
Sure. Yeah, I view myself as the aggregator of all of the studies that have been out there. I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I'm more interested in where's the rubber meet the road, what's the bottom line, how is this going to impact my day? But there are so many very talented, very brilliant educators and researchers out there that have done study after study that say exactly the same thing. When you try to do multiple things at the same time, you are switch tasking, and it's costing you a whole lot more than if you just did them one at a time.
Well, let's take that example. As an entrepreneur, that usually means you're trying to juggle a lot of things yourself, especially when you're in the early stages of beginning a business, and I'm sure you went through this. How do you go about doing that? Because, okay, I'm basically the only person here. I understand what you're saying, but I've got 6 or 7 things I have to do every day. How do we go about doing that successfully?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and I put together a little article called "The Order of Offloading," and basically it says the knee-jerk reaction when somebody has too much to do is, I need to go hire someone. And certainly I'm all for job creation, but I'm also for wise job creation, because what I see a lot with the young or inexperienced entrepreneurs is they hire someone and they fire them because they didn't create enough work for them initially. They were just throwing a person at a problem.
Right.
And so what you have to do is go through a process of first improving your personal systems. You have to improve the business systems. You need to look for technology options that you can offload things to. Then you can look at outsourcing, and then if we're still at the point where you have more to do than you can handle, then we're looking at the right time to make an educated hire, and it'll work because we've put systems in place to make it work.
Do we go so far as to set up, and I know you're big in organization and planning your day, is that the key to this, that, okay, from this time period, I'm going to set aside for this task. I'll complete that task and move on to task number 2. I'm going to do my emails, not as I see they're coming in, but do them several times a day. Is that the best way to tackle that problem?
Right. That's a kind of a generalized way of talking about it, but yes, that is the right way to do it. One of the things that I help people do is figure out what their most valuable activities are, what is worth the most per hour, and then budgeting time in their calendar to devote to their strengths, to devote to their most valuable activities. What instead happens for most people, unfortunately, is that they get interrupted, they get distracted, and also just their own personal disorganization causes their day to get filled up with this, that, and the other, which almost always is not their most valuable activity.
You're listening to this. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No,
just the average entrepreneur that I survey spends less than 20% of their time in their most valuable activities.
Which is amazing. That means 80% of the time they're doing something that's not their strong suit.
Right.
Or their strongest suit. You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Dave Crenshaw is our guest. Dave is a time management consultant, some of the nation's top business executives, and author of the book, The Myth of Multitasking, How Doing It All Gets Nothing Done. His website, davecrenshaw.com. A lot of great information there. You can sign up for some free newsletters as well. When you mention this to some people, I'm of the generation that, okay, so this whole multitasking thing, especially with all the electronic technological gadgets we have, is really new. So I'm learning this late in life. A lot of kids, when they're 5, 6, learn multitasking in terms of, texting and television and, everything that they're, although when I grew up, of course, we had television, we had 3 networks, but we had television. Is it easier for the younger people to multitask? Because they'll make that argument that, well, that's not a problem for us because we've done this all of our lives.
Well, if by saying easier to multitask, you mean easier to practice an unproductive behavior, yes, because they're conditioned to do things that way. But it doesn't matter how good you get at multitasking, it is the less effective way of getting things done. And that is the problem with the children that are being raised right now. It isn't the technology. It's that they're not learning how to use the technology properly. All of this is so new to all of us. The rate of technology explosion is just incredible. It's doubling every 24 months, and we're not keeping up with learning the skills of how to deal with this properly. And not only do we need to learn how to do it, but we need to learn how to help our children do it so that they learn the proper time and the proper place to use the technology that they have rather than trying to use it all at the same time.
Well, it's interesting because in business now, you almost need MySpace, you need Facebook, you've got LinkedIn, you've got a few other the websites that you feel like, the social sites you feel like should be part of. And then just recently they throw Twitter at you and you feel like I'm a loser if I'm not set up on Twitter.
Right. And I'll tell you that I'm involved in all of those, including Twitter. But I have systems in place to ensure that my personal contact with them is to a minimum. I actually spend very little time on Twitter, very little time on Facebook, yet as a speaker, as an author, it's necessary for me to be involved in those. So I have systems in place, and I have responsibilities even delegated to my team to stay on top of those things.
And I would assume if you don't have those, suddenly it's like, my God, I've been on Facebook for an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, right. Oh, absolutely. And it's a problem. That's a problem in and of itself, is just the creation of almost addictions to these things, because we don't have those who lack the skills and the right mindset of how to look at them end up getting just sucked into this black hole of time.
We've got, unfortunately, just about a minute and a half left. I want to ask you about a recent study that we used to think with cell phones the problem was actually holding something. We're finding out now that the problem is actually the conversation. Should we really limit the use of telephones in the car? Is it that big of a distraction?
Well, we talked about switch tasking, and I didn't talk a whole lot about background tasking. But background tasking is when you're doing something mindless or mundane in the background. To me, the key really is when you're having a conversation on the phone, are you background tasking or are you switch tasking? And really the easiest way to tell is, am I going to have to make decisions while I'm driving? If you're on a long stretch of deserted freeway, you're probably okay talking on the phone. But if you're going through the city, having to navigate turns and deal with traffic, then it's not a wise idea to be talking on your cell phone at the time.
Very interesting. And you have so many interesting things to talk about. And we went through the segment so quickly. We'll have Dave back on the program. Dave Crenshaw has been our guest on This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Dave's is very simple, davecrenshaw.com. If you want more detail on what Dave has talked about in the program, you can get it there. You can sign up for, like I said, some of the newsletters, that type of thing. We didn't even talk about, and we'll do this next time, balancing work and balancing home life. Dave's the father of a recently born baby girl. Dave, first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And when we come have you back, we'll talk about, okay, how you can juggle running a business and taking care of a new baby at home at the same time. We'll save that for another program. Dave, thank you so much for joining us on This Week in America.
Thank you very much, Rick.